will start recording. All right. Thanks everyone for showing up to today's impressive panel with Makiko Barrett and Barbara Arena, Mahmood Peshimam, and Skivington with Kjarsten Philipsen as the moderator. So I'm going to introduce you all with a short little bio so everyone can get a little idea of who is on the panel today. Today's panel discussion is called Beyond Safety Protocols, Return to Travel with Greater Confidence. And we have Makiko Barrett, one of the panelists. She is Director of Global Travel Programs at Automation Anywhere, Inc. And her career spans over 20 years managing corporate travel, reporting to procurement, finance, and operations. And before Automation Anywhere, Makiko managed the global travel program for a variety of companies, including Yahoo, LSI Corp, and Elon Pharmaceuticals. Next, we have Barbara Arena, and she is the Principal Category Manager at Oracle. Barbara has over 25 years of experience in the travel industry in agency and corporate travel sourcing. Her experience includes travel agency operations and corporate travel sourcing and supplier management with Oracle. She's also the Professional Development Director for the Silicon Valley chapter of GBTA. Next, we've got Dr. Mahmood Peshimam, MD. He is a residence-trained, board-certified family physician based in Orange County who has been in private practice for over 25 years. He has been practicing travel medicine for over 20 years and is one of only 3 physicians in Orange County that has passed the exam in travel medicine held by the International Society of Travel Medicine. Next, we've got Skivington, Vice President of Healthcare and Continuity and Support Services at Kaiser Permanente. Skip has over 26 years of experience at Kaiser Permanente and has executive responsibility for several key national departments to include nutrition services, travel and meeting services, emergency management, and business continuity. Skip concurrently served as the interim vice president of supply chain during the period of 2005 to 2009, and from 2015 to 2017 led Kaiser's security services program. And last but not least, we've got Kjarsten Philipsen, our moderator for today. He is the senior vice president of Americas at BCD Travel. And he's currently leading the commercial and operational teams, who's responsible for the success of global client partnerships spanning a range of sectors, including tech, finance, manufacturing, and professional services. He maintains overarching ensuring key organizational goals are met as they relate to growth, service delivery, customer satisfaction, and employee engagement. And last but not least, we'll be sending out an email at the end with not only the recording of this in case you missed anything, but also our feedback form. If you can kindly take a few minutes and fill that out, it allows us to understand what future speakers you want to hear from, what content, and what keeps these things moving and valuable. So we'd love for you to take a few minutes out of your day today when you get that email to fill out the feedback form. And Kjarsten, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Okay, well, very warm welcome. Good day, everybody. And thank you, Jen, for the very formal introductions. But hey, let's face it, it's a big industry, but it's a small community. So we all know one each other here. This is not meant to be, a one-way street in this discussion. So we're all kind of working our way through this global pandemic. This is meant to be a conversation. In fact, we have kind of some primary themes and kind of trends that we've been observing that we really want to talk about today, but nobody has the crystal ball. So let's make this fun. Let's make this interactive, and we can kind of just talk through some of these primary themes. And I do apologize if you do hear a little noise in the background. Today is my daughter's 14th birthday, and she got a new puppy as part of the COVID lockdown. So I'll try to keep the noise to a minimum. So this is the new era that we live in, right? So yeah, let's go ahead and get started, and wanted to kind of frame the discussion. And I'm actually, privileged to have Makiko and Barbara, Skip, and you guys can, my name is Kjarsten, but you can call me KJ by my nickname. Dr. Peshimam as well. He's happy to call him Dr. Pesh. So we all know one another. Let's just have a discussion here. So I'm going to go back. I said earlier on that this feels a little bit of the COVID twilight zone, and I don't say that with any sense of ill regard or disrespect, because obviously it's a very serious pandemic. It's taken very many lives, so it's a very serious thing. Of course, we are trying to return to some sense of normalcy, and as it does feel a little bit of Groundhog Day. And if we go back in time 4 months, that probably feels like dog years by now, I think, for most everybody. Even further, of what we thought going into the pandemic. And actually, I can share a story before we went into the pandemic, in full disclosure. So Skip works for Kaiser. He is not only manages the overall transient corporate travel, but he's responsible for patient care, in which BCD is their current travel provider. I work for BCD, so full transparency. Barrett and Makiko, they do not use BCD, and they have other travel management companies. This is not a sales pitch in any way, so this is just an open conversation, just sharing our experiences. But I'll share, and Skip, I hope you're okay with this, but Skip and I had a conversation going back to, I think it was January, early February, and Skip on a phone call said, we need to start planning. And okay, planning for what? You're gonna give us some new business. We're gonna expand. Great, I just love it. Whatever you got for me, let's go for it. And rather than hearing that, it's an expansion or a new piece of business or another initiative, Skip conveyed to me over the phone that we needed to start preparing for community-based spread of COVID-19 and the possibility of schools closing. And of course, if you had heard this as I did in February, a full month before we actually went into the pandemic, I distinctly remember getting off the phone, going over to my wife and say, can you believe what I just heard? No, it can't happen. But everything that Skip said came to pass. And so we quickly, as everyone recalls, have sunk into a quick shutdown. And early thoughts were that we were going to have a V-shaped recovery, that there would be a summer hiatus, that the virus would go away in the summer as the typical flu and cold season does, and that we would see recovery in the fall. In fact, I know we as an organization, we're planning on probably returning to 50-60% of normal volumes by the fall. And can you believe it? We're less than a month away from officially being fall, around a month away. And we're nowhere near that. There was also, you probably recall, talks about 3-4 months ago about potential partnerships, travel bubbles between countries where there's low infection. So New Zealand, Australia, Thailand, Vietnam, European countries that have controlled it quite well, like Greece as well, both for reasons that the virus has not been very predictable, or there's been a second or resurgence of the virus, and or political rationale as well. Those bubbles have not occurred. But we fast forward to today's climate, we are seeing some domestic, very little international, with many companies pulling back on corporate travel, at least through the end of the year. So what we thought a number of months ago, we'd probably be back at 50-60% by the fall, is starting to probably sink in. I think everybody knows that's likely not going to happen. Yet hoteliers have done a fantastic job. Hats off to the hoteliers, the airlines, the car rental companies, on rolling out new safety guidelines, procedures, protocols. The airlines more and more have been taking this quite seriously. I'm sure you've been watching closely in the media. We're making mask or face coverings compulsory. Delta has led the way in many respects, and of course other airlines have followed suit as well. And so while nothing is 100% certain in life, it would certainly seem that traveling today is safer than it's ever been before. And actually there's been experts, COVID-19 and epidemiology experts have said that the potential for COVID-19 transmission through traveling and on airplanes specifically is quite low, that we actually have not seen widespread transmission from this mode of travel, right? It's more from things of general population or gatherings where guidelines are not being followed. So you would think that we have the condition to return to travel. In fact, the U.S. State Department just recently, through the Global Level 4, have removed the Do Not Travel advisory. But yet, according to Longwood's International Travel Sentiment Survey on July 29th, confidence coming from various government sources and the public health officials is declining. So I'm going to read off some stats here. Percentage of travelers relying on information on the safety of U.S. travel from the CDC or federal health agencies has dropped from 57% in April, on April 22nd, to 45% on July 29th. Confidence in information from the White House Coronavirus Task Force also has declined from 24% on April, from 24% in April to 17% in July. And reliance on information from the state officials has slipped from 36% in April to 27% in July. This discussion is not meant to be political in any way. We're going to have a commercial business discussion, and one that's also based upon factors guided by science. But so with this is kind of where we're at, right? This is the baseline. This is where we're currently at in this COVID bubble. And I'm sure, again, going back to the earlier comment, none of us has a crystal ball. So who knows where we're going to be? Hopefully we will, in the next few months, hopefully we will have a vaccine, treatments, et cetera, that are going to be advancing to the point where we can have a greater assurance about the risk. So for today, what we're going to do with that, again, as the kind of the opening comments, we're going to separate this into three parts. So number one, really kind of discussion of why we think we are experiencing these trends. Number two, with the help of Dr. Pesh, what is the current state of testing? What is essential for individual safety when considering travel? Of course, input from Skip, Barbara, and Makiko here as well. And then lastly, what resources should be utilized for planning to travel, whether it be leisure and or for corporate. And of course, the main emphasis here is corporate. And what are some other practical tips to minimize exposure while traveling? I'm sure some of you have also seen that there's been reports in the media. In fact, there did make its rounds in LinkedIn. There was an Inside Edition, undercover, probably a bit more on the sensational side of protocols that weren't necessarily followed in some hotels. So what can we do to arm and educate our travelers to be prepared? Because again, there is no assurance this is life. So you have to take kind of matters in your own hands to prepare for travel to the extent that you are comfortable, and everybody's comfort level is going to be a little bit different. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We're actually already 20 minutes in and time goes quickly. So before we jump into the first topic, if I could have Barbara, Makiko, Skip, and Dr. Pesh just quickly talk a little bit more, expanding upon the nice intro that Jen provided, and just kind of give, what they're seeing in terms of, well, first of all, their roles and responsibility, and as well as, what they're seeing in terms of where they're at in this pandemic right now, whether it be, let's start with you, Barbara. What Oracle is, where they're currently at in this cycle, as we talked about. We thought we'd see a V shape, hasn't turned out that way. What's going on at our Oracle?
Yeah, thanks, KJ. I think just further my introduction, I've been with Oracle for about 15 years, and I work, as Jen mentioned, in the sourcing department. I work with many of the different suppliers and work with the relationships with our air and hotel suppliers, and continuing to build those relationships as we go through this pandemic. And I think we were thinking the same thing as being a V or some sort of lull and then coming back. But with Oracle right now, we are still pretty shut down. Only business essential travel, and that really is based on if you cannot do your job through a virtual environment, and then also through through phone, then you cannot travel. So you can't, that's just not how it happens. So we had closed down our booking tool at one point. We've opened it back up, but we still do not have the ability to book any reservations through it without some further approvals up pretty high within the company. Back to you. Are you on mute?
Kjarsten, you're on mute.
Yeah.
I'm on mute. I thought you were saying Makiko's on mute. How embarrassing. Makiko, over to you. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay, no problem. Hi, everyone. I work for a software company that makes a robotic process automation software. We are still a startup, a little over 2,500 employees. We have grown tremendously in 2019, and then we have rounds of layoffs like many other tech companies. So now we're down to 2,500. Like Barbara said, we're pretty shut down. We started early because we have a big presence in Asia Pac. So Singapore, Tokyo shut down first in February, and then it trickled down to other locations, US in March, I think India in April. Right now, though, Asia is open. So Singapore, Tokyo, Korea, they're all back in the office, normal, commute. However, the company doesn't force anybody to travel. If you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to. Also, of course, it's strictly domestic because most of the borders are still closed. But China, I see a lot of tickets issued for domestic. Europe has started also because between the EU countries, you can travel back and forth. The only place that's not doing anything is really the US. So that is, like everyone here, like probably 80% of my travel spend. So I would like that piece to come back, but right now I don't see coming back in the future yet.
Thanks, Makiko. Skip, why don't we go over to you? Skip, you work at an organization, Kaiser Permanente, that has a significant number of employees, 200,000 employees, believe it or not. And Skip, why don't you talk to the audience about kind of the unique differentiation of your program? So you have responsibility for both the transient, so business travelers like me, as well as you have these frontline patient care. So why don't you kind of share a little bit there?
Sure. And if anybody out there is a Kaiser member, thank you for your support. And more importantly, if you need care, and anyone in your family, your extended family, please, consider it safe to get your deferred care, because we had to shut down elective procedures and things like that in response to the pandemic. And this is our national response. This is our 26th week, and apologize, they're repaving my street out front, so you may hear some background noise. Some of the uniquenesses, in terms of the business travel, that's followed everybody else. I mean, it's essentially non-existent. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And then, as KJ mentioned, we as part of our benefit for the 12 million plus members that are with Kaiser is transplant services. So if someone needs a transplant, we'll manage that whole process, get them into a world-class transplant center, and handle the travel situation for them and their family, whoever their support is for the procedure. So that goes on, because even though we're in a pandemic, we're in an otherwise lockdown environment, we've been bringing back patient care services in a very measured way, because we're managing the surges throughout this whole point, this whole period. So and we appreciate the BCD's support for that, because we've got to keep them safe as they go through the travel experience. And then another unique aspect to this is for the last 6 months or so, even just before the pandemic started, I had a special assignment to help bring online our own medical school, because we anticipate a physician shortage in the years ahead. And one of our solutions to that was to build and get accredited a medical school, which last week was the first day of the first class of our medical school program. And so bringing that on added a new dimension to us, because we're just like any other school, and how to socially distant within the, remain socially distant within the learning environment at the school. So learning a lot in terms of how to do that correctly. And now going back to the business travel, what we have seen from this is that we think when we come out of this, whenever that is, and I think we'll still be talking this time next year, and hopefully not as isolated away, but certainly I don't see us being completely out of the woods yet by this time next year. So there'll be some element of distance operations and remote operations at play, one of which is going to impact business travel, because I think we've shown that we can work effectively remotely, and that includes any necessity to travel to locations. So I think that rebound effect from a business perspective, certainly from within our company, is going to take years, and part of it is going to be by necessity because of the virus, and we have no idea how that's going to play out. Is it going to morph? Is something else going to come along? Number one. But number two, and I think as important, there'll still be a psychological effect at play here, and many people and their families are going to continue to be nervous regardless of what gets done or what is done at hotels and other locations. So it'll take a while for that to kind of, we can move away from that from an individual experience. We will, it just will take some more time. So I think I'll stop there and turn it back to you unless you have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Skip. That's very helpful. And I remember to take myself off mute this time, so I'm learning. Dr. Pesh, you are on mute. So if you want to take yourself off mute, why don't you kind of share the two aspects of your practice? Equally, you have two kind of distinct elements of your practice.
Yeah, I'm a family physician by training. I've been in practice for over 30 years, and 50% of my practice is travel medicine, and 50% of my practice is family medicine. So I do a little bit of both. Since the COVID thing came about, the travel medicine part has definitely slowed down dramatically. So we just get some stragglers here and there going on a mission trip or something like that. We do get people coming in saying that they might travel domestically, and the airlines are asking them to get a COVID test before they travel within 3 days of traveling. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about testing, because testing is important. In some illnesses, testing gives you a black and white answer, and it's much more helpful. Since this illness is rather new, testing has become rather more complicated. So when we are testing, there are two types of tests that can be done. One is to look for the virus, meaning active illness, and the other is to look for the antibody to the virus, which means that you've been exposed to the virus in the past, either acutely or in the remote past. In the test for the virus assessment, there are two types of tests. One test examines the RNA, DNA, the nuclear material, and that's called the PCR test. Another word for that is molecular testing. And the second type of test for checking the virus is called an antigen test. And the antigen test checks on the protein on the virus. Now let's start with the antibody testing is not recommended by the CDC because it has too many flaws in it. So what people are doing is either the antigen test or the PCR test. The antigen test, the drawback of the antigen test, it's a very rapid test, and a lot of it can be done at one time, but there are a lot of false negatives. So the place where it's being employed mainly is sometimes in hospitals, where they might, if they are suspecting a patient with COVID, they might do the antigen test first, and if it's positive, then they have the answer. But if it's negative, then they have to do the PCR testing. The PCR testing can take up to about, in hospital settings, about for maybe in 2 hours, they can do about 12 tests. So that's inside the hospital. Then they can also farm out the test to laboratories. And depending on how much equipment the laboratories have, then the backlog will be determined by that. The difficulty is that in the hospitality industry, you're looking for the oddball that is sick, the patient that is sick. Whereas in the medical field, we're looking for, it's different. People come in with symptoms and they look sick, they're sick. It's easier to identify them in terms of testing. Whereas you want to see that everybody is healthy in air travel or in hotel setting. Even the PCR testing is not 100% accurate. I think it's about 96% accurate. Now, so many people travel, say by in an airplane, 300 people, so 96%, you're talking about 4% negative, false negative, that's what I'm talking about. So, but there are a lot of people doing the PCR testing or some tests which look like or resemble the PCR testing, which have been approved by the FDA. Some of them have been approved only for an emergency period of time until this COVID comes about. But that's the best we've got right now. And specific about whether they're talking about the antigen testing, antibody testing, or the PCR testing, because they're used for different purposes. Like if you're checking for a whole large population in a city, you may choose to do antibody testing because your purpose of getting information might be different. In other words, you might want to see how many people have already contracted the virus in the past and how many haven't, which is a different piece of information. And in the hospital setting or in sick patient setting, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who's acute. Hospitality industry, it becomes sick and not the majority who are healthy. And I don't know how, I don't have any great idea to overcome that part of it. The other thing is, as I was mentioning earlier, I found out, at least in Orange County where I'm located, that there are multiple sites where you can get the PCR testing. And some people also advertise that they can do large volume of PCR testing.
So Dr. Pesh, we're happy.
I haven't looked
challenges
into them as of yet. There was one test called ID9, but yesterday I found out that the hospitals that bought it, they had a lot of negative, false negative results. So as the data comes in, the information changes. So I don't have any magic answers. It's a fluid situation and we're learning day by day. If any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Pesh, and apologies for the audience. I know the
can you hear me?
Quite great. Dr. Pesh, I think your bandwidth is a bit low, so thank you for that. And that does kind of lay the groundwork. That was actually kind of part two. We wanted to talk about the current state of testing. So we kind of already covered that off. So what we did say, or what I did say earlier on, we kind of framed the discussion as well. We were talking about these trends that we're seeing, also to get input from the panel. So Skip, Makiko, Barbara, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we're already getting through a bulk of the hour. I want to shift more to what can we do to really educate our travelers. I mean, Dr. Pesh, you know, already highlighted that there's inconsistency in testing. We know that there's probably a little bit of inconsistencies between the supply network, as well as there's inconsistencies at a state or regional or at a municipality level of with regards to the measures and just the community at large, kind of abided by the guidance. So real quickly, let's just spend a little bit of time on why do we think we're experiencing these trends, and I'll leave it to Makiko, Barbara, Skip, you guys just jump in.
Okay, I'll start. So I think, KJ, you hit right on the nail that inconsistency is a big, big, big issue. You know, we don't have same response anywhere you go from the national government is one thing. But also, if you look at suppliers, you know, like I think now all the airlines are kind of in line. They force people to wear the mask. But because of social media, it's so easy to know in such a like little flight somewhere, somebody was not wearing a mask and flight attendant was not doing anything to make that person wear the mask. Also, like other airlines might be a little bit more strict, but some are not. Hotels do things a little differently. So anywhere you go, you have to look up information on your own, and it's ever changing. So what you read yesterday might not be the same case today. So that inconsistency is making people think, oh, I can't be bothered, I just won't travel. So I think that's what we're seeing. People are not confident. And then of course the people factor, right? I know suppliers are doing a great job. I actually don't distrust. I know there was this video clip from Inside Edition. I'm sure that's just a minority and most suppliers are doing a great job to keep people safe. But what if a person close to you is not following the protocol? How forcible can supplier be? I think that's more of the factor that's making people not confident.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thanks, Makiko. Skip or Barbara, anything incrementally different or new to add to Makiko's comments?
Well, I agree with them 100%. And the one thing I would add is that unfortunately, and I don't want to paint this in there's bad guys and not so good guys in this whole arena of giving information. Unfortunately, though, I think what is driving a lot of the misinformation, disinformation, is the tribal politics that we have evolved into or devolved into as a nation. I think that I see that every day. That is definitely playing into this. And it's unfortunate because that should be separate. The political piece of this should be separate from the science. Because the fact is, if you wear a mask, you practice distancing wherever it is, even in your household if necessary, and you wash your hands, that will go a long way to curbing this situation. Where we see people using it as making political statements and turning it into super spreader events, we reap what we sow. So that would be the only thing I'd want to add, and I see, and I hope we can deal with that as a nation.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Skip. Barbara?
And I think the other challenge we have is that every state and country are at different phases of this pandemic. And as we continue to go through it, it's changing, it's ever changing. And there's nothing concrete that we can put our hand down on and say, okay, this is the method that we need to move forward with because of the different, the political side and then also just the level of the phases that we're in. And I know that there is an industry or there's an organization out there, as a grassroots effort right now, trying to put some standards in place. And I think they're doing a great job in establishing those standards. I don't know at one point where everybody will be adopting those. So I think it's really a great opportunity to continue to watch that grow. And I think if everyone just follows the rules, just keep your masks on, keep your mask on, keep your social distancing, and move forward. And there are people out there that are really nervous about it, but then on the other side, there's people that just say, you know what, let's just keep moving forward. Let's do what we have to do and move forward. And those are the people that I think are going to get everybody back on the road. I think as we continue to utilize the information that our suppliers are putting together and making sure that it's clarified in the industry about what they're doing to keep everybody safe. I think, as we continue to move forward, it's going to slowly roll out, but it's going to take a lot of time.
Thank you, Barbara. I think those are all great points. And we've got, we're entering the last 15 minutes, so we'll shift into the next and last topic. But before I do so, I think we've kind of highlighted, these inconsistencies, the challenges with the testing. Yet we know travel can be done, and can be done more confidently, feeling safer if you subscribe or watch the Skift travel news articles that come out. Yesterday, there was a great one highlighting Dubai and what they are doing in terms of getting travel back in travelers back in, which obviously there's a lot of tourism there, testing before they arrive, testing after they arrive, making sure they follow the protocols. So look that article up if you haven't read it. They're actually doing, it seems, quite well. It's written from a perspective of a journalist who's actually taken the journey to Dubai. Also, you may have noticed that Etihad has adopted this health ambassador, I believe it's called. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but they're doing a lot to not only enforce the protocols, they also in Dubai are doing spot audits and checks of coming in and checking safety protocols to, again, raise that level of adherence, as well as that drives up the level of confidence. So it can be done, but in absence of that, let's shift into our last topic, which is in absence of that, and hopefully we will be able to achieve that as a nation in the weeks, months to come. But in absence of that, what resources should be utilized for planning travel? And what are some practical tips to minimize the exposure while traveling? Again, you can't get 100%, but as Jen noted, she's got this upcoming trip and she's taking measures of bringing family members and friends together, testing before or after. I just took a trip as well, was very well prepared. I was happy that I didn't need half of the measures that my wife and I had planned to keep our family safe. So it can be done. So Barbara, let's start off with you from a business perspective, and as well as you, Makiko and Skip. What can we do to provide the information that travelers need so they can make informed decisions?
Yeah, for our travelers, what we're doing is ahead of time, once they book their reservation, we're sending them information to say, hey, go into this repository and check out what our suppliers are doing to make sure that you're safe on the road. That's one of the first things we're doing. And then when they return from the trip, we're surveying them to say, hey, what did you think about the situation on the road? Were you feeling safe? Did you find that these new protocols are effective? And that survey, then we work closely with our suppliers to make sure that they hear the results of our travelers. As we work together, we're only going to make things better when we work together. We can't, throw our suppliers under the bus and do that. It's just not effective. It's working together. Everyone's going to slip up, and we just got to remember that this is a new process that we're going through. So those are the things that we're working through. Travelers also have access to social media. making sure that, you know, they're checking those types of social medias, but just really collaborating with our duty of care, ISOS, World Aware, and making sure that we're communicating what we need to keep our travelers safe. But then bottom line, I think our travelers need to be their own advocates. They need to do the due diligence that they have to do when they're on the road. If it means that they need to have more wipes with them to make sure that they're wiping down everything in their hotel room or their back seat on the airplane, then that's what they need to do. But to make them feel safe, it's just taking precautions very similar to the flu season, making sure that you are social distancing from someone who is not feeling well or acting as though they're not feeling well. I think that's, you know, we have to really take some ownership as well as people, as travelers.
Okay, I'll go next. So I do agree everything Barbara had said. So give them information to make their own decisions. It's really like, I am not able to make decisions for them. I don't know what their medical situation is, their family situation is, how confident they feel. So what I can do is just to push out the most updated information. And in order to do that, I do rely on TMC's reports because we are a startup. And my number one priority right now is to preserve cash for the company, in addition to keeping the travelers safe. So I rely on TMC reports to push out information using their messenger app. And I try to provide them the links so that I don't have to go in and update the information manually. But if I provide the link will update itself, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. Also, I did create a new the new normal document, which Jen, if you have the infographics that BCD Travel made, similar to what BCD had made, but a little bit more in depth, meaning, you know, I have all the links about how to clean your hotel room. You know, this is the dirtiest place in the hotel room. You know, I think number one was the remote control. So, you know, I go into that level of detail. Also, if you're taking an Uber, make sure you have a mask because you have to take a picture of yourself before you can book a ride, right? So those like really detailed information, I push it out. But what I'm really trying to do right now is to have the information displayed in the OBT when they search the flight. So with, you know, the travel risk management company, the information goes out after the ticket is issued. We have so many unused tickets that I need to use, and we're cash strapped, right? Because we're a startup. So I don't need to add more to the pile of unused tickets. So I'm working with tech company to display all the custom messaging when they search the flight. So if they look for a destination, that's when the warning pops up. Hey, this place has a 14-day quarantine. So the traveler will say, oh, then it's not worth going. So that's what I'm working on.
Thanks, Makiko. And before I hand it over to Skip to add, because we're coming in, we want to make sure we get to some of these questions as well. I did see one of the questions, and it asks, can you give an example where a supplier did a really good job of providing assurance? And I certainly can, because I mentioned I went on this recent trip. I stayed in Mammoth Lakes. I would never, you know, if I had experienced something that wasn't good, I would keep that confidential. I wouldn't share the name, but in this case, they did a really good job. So the Westin Mammoth Lakes did an amazing job. So we actually called ahead of time to request a room that had at least one, if not two or more days between guests. And they actually stated, well, it was actually our policy. They had a minimum of 1 day between guests, and they confirmed that we had a room that had not been occupied for more than 3 days. So that raised our comfort level greatly, that, you know, if the room had been contaminated, a period of time had gone by. So as Makiko mentioned, you know, the contaminants could be on surfaces. Upon arrival, all of their staff were wearing face coverings, plexiglass. They had marked on all of the locations on the floor, social distancing. They made it very clear upon check-in, providing, they would not give anything paper, but they gave information of getting their policies. They also made it very clear that they're only family members in the elevator at any one time. As the Mammoth Lakes Westin is quite large, they also pointed the direction for stairs, so that if you were healthy, right, and you could handle the stairs, to please use the stairs as well, giving the elevator preference to those who are probably more elderly and not able to use the stairs. So they did a lot of good practical things that just really improved our stay, and we felt very safe, and we'd go back. So Skip, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, real fast. I agree with Makiko and Barbara and their comments 100%. You know, for me, the kind of the measures are this. For the most part, our organization, unless you're delivering direct patient care or you're performing critical functions that can only be done in a building, an office building, everybody else is working remotely. We've extended that for certain through the end of the year, and I believe strongly that'll be extended into 2021, because even though I'm very confident a vaccine will be brought forward by the end of the year, it won't be in quantities that will get enough people vaccinated so that we can be protected on a larger scale. So if we're not bringing people to work, you can bet your bottom dollar we're not going to put them on airplanes or expect that they travel anywhere. So again, that, you know, there's a little bit of a delay in that. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, I'm somewhere in the middle. I do have to travel for work, and I do have to fly, stay in hotels, and I feel relatively safe. You know, it's going to be a situation where even with the best of intentions, the virus has a life of its own, and if it catches you, and you're going to have to deal with that. And that's unfortunate, because we don't have therapeutics completely and a vaccine yet. So you know, but we can't, you know, stop living. We can't stop working. We got to keep moving forward in a measured way. And so I believe in the marketplace forces, because those of you that work for hotels, I know you're doing everything you possibly can to keep your clients safe, because if you don't, the marketplace will punish you in such a direct and drastic way that you know, it won't be an issue, because those that figure out that cleanliness all along should have been job one. Because you know, even before a pandemic, I expected that my rooms and my properties I visited would be clean to not just a basic standard, but a high standard. And if everybody did their job in those conditions, I think we all be safer. So and so I do that. I say that only because from, you know, I use that personal experience then to help with people that may be hesitant to travel, because I do get calls from people that are put in the same situation where they really need to make a trip, and we go through the same kind of discussion that I'm just having now with all of you on what to do and how to feel. They're going to have to feel it on their own, because it is a highly personal situation, and we don't know what their health conditions are, and those with underlying conditions are more at risk and than others, and that has to be accounted for. And there's no shortcut, and there's no recipe, there's no playbook that's going to solve for every one of those individual cases. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you, KG.
Thank you, Skip. And with minutes remaining, Jen, were there some specific questions that you saw you wanted to call out? I do want to, I'm conscious of time and that we're running lean here. The time has flown by. It's always nice spending it with close colleagues and friends.
Absolutely. I don't think there were too many questions. Brian Zog said, may we also plan for a life if there's no vaccine? Seems to me our main plan is hope for a miracle and stop living until then. Otherwise, How many hotels and businesses here have updated their websites to address the questions the traveler has, like with COVID policies and their protocols? You know, we say do your research, but are we as an industry even supplying it? So there's some points there. Go ahead, KJ.
No, I was just going to say, just capitalize on what Skip said. I just, you know, going and back to my earlier comments, there's so much that we had preconceived ideas of what we knew about this virus going in, and it's proving that we don't, and we still don't. We don't have a crystal ball. Those for you are sports fans. We see that, you know, baseball, basketball is picking back up again. It's doubtful if we have NCAA football. I'm a big NBA fan, so NBA is resumed in a bubble in Orlando. And there is one player who tested 24 days in a row positive, showing any symptoms. So I think that is a lesson for all of us, right? So as Skip mentioned, in the absence of a vaccination or a cure, you almost need to travel with confidence. You have to be aware that there is a risk, but that risk can be mitigated if you take the appropriate steps. Social distancing, face coverings, frequent washing of hands, and obviously traveling with your travel suppliers, your air, car, hotel suppliers that have made a firm commitment to health, hygiene, and safety.
Well, Kjarsten, we thank you so much for leading this panel today, and Skip, Barbara, Makiko, Mahmood, the entire panel. We want to just give you a virtual round of applause for safety beyond protocol. And this is something, guys, if anyone has any last minute questions that they can think of, please do fill it out within our feedback form. Jen will be sending this out within the next day or two, and it's just going to make us better. We really want to support you, again, personally and professionally. So this will definitely help move this forward. And last but not least, we do have another hospitality mastermind webinar in 2 weeks, and it's the power of mentorship. Carrie Flowers, Steve Panetti of Kimpton Hotels, Peter Gamez of Hunter Hospitality. We're gonna having some great dynamic speakers there, and continue to tune in. Kjarsten, it's great to have you back. We really appreciate, again, your leadership within BCD and all of you here today. So have an amazing day. Go out there, stay encouraged. We're going to get through this. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Skip, everybody. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys out there. Take care.